Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Eyes of the Opposition series. This is of course the show in which we get the perspective of an opposition fan, writer, journalist or presenter and get their thoughts ahead of the game against Arsenal, of course, at the weekend. And this week is no different. Arsenal are travelling to the Hornets' Nest to face Watford. Many things to discuss, many things to talk about. And this week I'm very happy to be joined by Jacob Culshaw of WD18, which is a Watford-based YouTube channel, which of course you can go check out with all the information in the description. But let's jump straight into the Q&A. But before we do, please make sure you're liking the video and subscribing if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you can join in some of our live shows. But if you have already, fantastic stuff. Please leave those comments and let us know what you think of the shows and go back and watch some of the ones we've done already. But let's jump straight into the questions and ask Jacob the most obvious one, because for those that have been living under a bit of a rock, you would have noticed that Kiko Sanchez Flores has been reappointed as Watford manager, with Javi Gracia being sacked at the helm. And I want to get Jacob's reaction to the latest news surrounding that management decision.
So the big news coming out of Watford this week is that Javi Gracia has been sacked and reappointed as former Watford head coach Kiko Sanchez Flores, who guided us to a 13th place finish in the 2015-16 season, our first season back in the Premier League. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't surprised that Javi Gracia did leave on Saturday evening. I was surprised, however, that Kiko Sanchez Flores returned, and I think no Watford fan expected that. I don't know whether he was the club's first choice to come in, but certainly he's a manager who was very good defensively in the first season back in the Premier League. He knows how to set up his team with compact defensively, and actually he worked with a really poor team in that season. We've improved massively since then. Do I agree with the sacking of Javi Gracia? I do. Unfortunately, that's nothing against Javi. I think he was a fantastic man. He did a lot for Watford, obviously guided us to our first FA Cup final, reached our highest ever Premier League finish. But we'd gone on a winless run of 8, and including the FA Cup final as well, that was a winless run of 9, and we're just conceding far too many goals under him. We look at the first 2 home games, Brighton and West Ham, 3 goals conceded in both of those games. We go to Everton away, we concede 1 goal as well, and then obviously Newcastle away, before the international break we conceded again. So we're just conceding far too many goals at the moment, 8 goals in total, and when you're not putting many in the back of the net at the other end, then it starts to bring up a lot of issues. I felt like Javi needs to go, something just needed to change. Now, to other fans who aren't Watford fans, probably are thinking this is a bit of a harsh sacking, but in reality it had been coming, and I think a lot of Watford fans don't have any grudges towards Javi, but I just think he needed to move on, and new tactics and new ideas needed to come into the club, because quite quickly the season could spiral out of control because we were on a really poor run of form. So in answer to your question, I was surprised to see Kike come back in, but I wasn't surprised to see Javi Gracia sacked, and I back the decision.
I think there's only one real question when it comes to Kiko Sanchez Flores. He's come back. I thought he was fairly harshly sacked during his first stint at the Hornets, but when you come back in, we know that there's been an impact and we know that there can be a bump from bringing that new manager in. But do you think someone like Kiko Sanchez Flores, who's had one shot at it already, can actually turn things around and improve on what's been going on at Watford?
Yeah, I do back Kiko Sanchez Flores to turn things around at Watford. And I think the reason the Pozzos have brought him in is because defensively he's a very solid coach. As I mentioned in the previous answer, in the 2015-16 season, our first season back in the Premier League, he was compact defensively, and there was a real emphasis on not conceding many goals. Now, I'd argue our defence was actually worse back then than it is now. There's not been a massive progression really from then till now, but he has a better squad at his disposal, Kike. So I'm really hoping that he can make us a bit more of a solid defensive unit, improve on what he had in the 2015-16 season, and kind of create a really strong defensive foundation. I back him to do that. Particularly up until Christmas, we were solid defensively. It started to go a little bit downhill, similar to Javi, as the season progressed and as we went past Boxing Day. So, yeah, it was harsh at the time, and I think in retrospect, the Pozzos and Scott Duxbury will admit that we shouldn't have got rid of Kike, but it was mutual. Both parties went their separate ways because they viewed that season differently. Kike viewed it as a success. The Pozzos viewed it as we could have done better. But in hindsight, we should have really kept him and not appointed Walter Mazzarri. He wasn't the best manager. But I hope he does have a strong impact. I back him too. And I think it's quite a clever appointment because of his defensive qualities.
Now, if he is going to make an impact on that Watford side, he's got a bit of a job to do because, of course, Watford are the only team in the Premier League so far not to take 3 points from any of their fixtures, so quite a big job. It does confuse me though, because when we look at Watford, they're a team that are usually quite strong. They provided Arsenal with plenty of problems over the years. So what has gone so wrong for them this season?
So, where has it gone wrong for Watford thus far? 2 words, the defence. 8 goals conceded in the first 4 games, 6 of those coming at home to Brighton and West Ham. Not good enough. And when you're only conceding 2 goals at the other end, it frankly cost Javi his job. Javi, there's a few factors to blame. Number 1 is Javi. Tactically, we were really poor. He was unwilling to change it from the 4-4-2. That did work for the majority of last season, but when it didn't go too right, he wasn't willing to change it up. And the only time he did was away at Newcastle before the international break, where we set up with a 5 at the back, and we didn't take the game to Newcastle. No disrespect, we should be taking the game to Newcastle. I believe we're a better side than that. And that did cost Javi his job, and I think the defence has cost Javi his job because we're just not good enough at the moment. Having said that, the recruitment needs to take a lot of responsibility because we brought in Craig Dawson for £5.5 million from West Bromwich Albion, and we thought it'd be an upgrade on what we already have. And that doesn't seem to be the case. Kiko Femini is having a really off season so far. Craig Cathcart hasn't been good enough. Jose Holebas hasn't reached the heights that he did last season, So there's a lot of factors to blame. The players, the personnel that were brought in as well, and the lack of personnel brought in, but also tactically from Javi. 3 factors that have really caused a weak defence to the start of this Premier League season. When you're not only scoring 2 goals in the first 4 games as well, it's not good enough. 8 goals conceded, 2 scored. That's where it's gone wrong. I know it's obvious, but defensively we're so weak at the moment. And that makes me worried for Arsenal on Sunday, just because of the attacking prowess you possess. Aubameyang, Lacazette, Pepe. It makes me worried for Sunday. But hopefully, with Kiko coming in, with him being a more defensively minded coach, he can produce the goods and hopefully can make a really weak defence a strong one.
Now, if there's one team in the league that needs to think about changing a weak defence into a strong one, arguably it's not Watford, but it's Arsenal if they want to turn their fortunes around to be, again, one of the really, really strong forces in the Premier League. But that's something that maybe we'll have to wait for in a little bit in the future. But focusing on the now, Arsenal have made plenty of changes to try and not just sort of strengthen in a forward line area, but also in the defence. But there was one player that left, which sort of... it hurt a lot of fans because I think he was certainly liked by a lot of the Arsenal supporters, did really well for us, scored some big goals, especially in cup competitions, and that was Danny Welbeck. And Danny Welbeck has now left and, of course, joined Watford, which is... it's good to see him getting a decent team under his belt and getting playing time. But I'm really interested to see what you think, Jacob, as to what Welbeck might do for Watford this season.
I think if you spoke to the vast majority of Watford fans, they'd agree that Danny Welbeck was a brilliant acquisition in the summer, particularly on a free transfer. Now, we know Danny has had his injury problems in the past, not only at Arsenal but Manchester United as well, but he's a former England international, and if he can get back to playing regular first-team football at Watford, then I'm sure he'll be back in the frame and will definitely be giving Gareth Southgate a few calls to make. But I do feel like Watford is a great place for Danny Welbeck to get back to his old self. We're going to give him the opportunity to play regular first-team football, which is obviously attractive for him. He hasn't had to move anywhere because obviously London Colney, Watford's training ground is right next to Arsenal, so it's a really good move for him in that sense as well, logistically. But at the same time, it's a great place to nurture his skills. Watford's a really good club to come to. We've brought through players who have left big clubs, the likes of Tom Cleverley, the likes of Etienne Capoue, and I'll be looking at those 2 players who actually got a lot of stick at their previous clubs, Spurs and Man United respectively. Everton, where we got Tom Cleverley. And he'll be thinking, you know what, I can turn it around and I can actually get back to where I want to be. Hopefully he can get match fit. He played 90 minutes against Coventry City, which is really encouraging for all Watford fans to see him in a Watford shirt for the first time for 90 minutes anyway. And he got a really good reception away at Everton as well. So the fans have taken to him. Hopefully if he gets some more game time under Kike, we can see the best of Danny Welbeck.
Danny Welbeck was always someone in which I liked at Arsenal, and seeing him go was gutting, but it was definitely part of the process and one of those sort of high earners that needed to be moved on for us to move on to the next stage. But I wish him the best and really hope that he can recover what has been a pretty tormented career with injuries, but hopefully he can turn it around at the Hornets' Nest, and we'll see what happens moving forwards. But last question is really focusing on Sunday's game. It's a big game for both teams. Watford in desperate need of points. Arsenal need to turn it around after a couple of disappointing results against Liverpool and in the North London derby. But I'm interested, Jacob, about how you think this game is going to stack up.
So taking a look at this Sunday, Watford versus Arsenal in the 4:30 kickoff. It's a big game for us, a really big game for Kike as well. He's got 5 games before the next international break. We've got to play you guys, Manchester City away, which is almost a write-off now, and Spurs as well. In between that, we've got Wolves and Sheffield United. So I'd imagine he's looking at the Wolves and Sheffield United game thinking they're the 2 games we need to be targeting. Having said that, it'll be important to see a performance this coming Sunday, particularly defensively. Can we stop our defensive woes? Because at the moment we've been poor under Javi. But I back Kike to turn it around. Now, it'll be tough to stop the attacking prowess of Aubameyang, Lacazette and Nicolas Pepe. And I'd argue that they're the best front 3 outside of Liverpool, Manchester City. It's going to be tough for our defence to deal with the pace of your guys' front 3. Having said that, and I know a lot of Arsenal fans would agree, defensively, you look vulnerable at times, particularly with David Luiz, Socrates as well. They've got a mistake in them, and can we capitalise on that? It'll be a big miss not having Troy in. Having said that, it'll be interesting to see the formation Kike goes with, and I can't really predict that now. I'd be surprised if he continued with the 4-4-2 that Javi used, but certainly Troy's a big miss for us because he could bully, I think, the back four. We've seen it before, particularly in that game in the 2017-18 season where Tom cleverly scored a last-minute winner at home against Arsenal. He bullied the back line when he came on, and he'll be a big miss for us. So hopefully, Andre Gray, Gerard Deulofeu, Willis, Milasar start. We just don't know at the moment as Watford fans because with the new manager coming in, it's hard to predict what team he's going to pick. But I'm sure he'll be looking at the players on the training ground this week and thinking which team is best to beat Arsenal. And I do have I kind of had a little feeling we might be able to nick something from the game. It's wishful thinking, but I just think with Arsenal's defensive problems at the moment, we may be able to capitalise. But having said that, at the other end of the pitch, you're very, very strong. My prediction for the game is an optimistic 1-1. I do think we'll score, and I think we may be able to nick a point just because it's Kike's first game. It's at home. It'll be a really good atmosphere, and I think we will see a managerial bounce, and I hope we do anyway. It's going to be a tough game. We all know that. But the important thing is if we can see a performance. So, yeah, sorry, that's about it.
Brilliant stuff from Jacob there. Big thanks to him, of course, for taking the time out of his evening. And it is evening, as you can tell. So much going on in my life that we have to squeeze one of these editing late on a Thursday night, just so you guys can get this content the next day. But again, a big thank you to Jacob for taking the time out of his evening to get this content out for you guys. It's a tough one to call. It really, really is in terms of Arsenal, Watford. Watford have taken plenty of points off Arsenal in the past. I think anything less than 3 points for any Arsenal fan is going to be a huge disappointment for us, considering how we're meant to be stepping on. But for Watford, it's a really big game, and whilst yes, there are some tricky fixtures for those guys besides the likes of Sheffield United, etc., but they need to pick up points in these games at some point, and Arsenal is an easy one for some teams to target. They know that they're vulnerable at the back, and they can utilise that as something to go for. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do end up dropping points at Vicarage Road, but we're just going to have to see. But yeah, big thanks to Jacob. You can check out all his stuff in the description, and if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like, please subscribe if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, and I'll see you again very, very soon for some more videos and previews. And make sure you're subscribed to listen to the Raw reaction will be immediately after the Arsenal-Watford game, and of course the podcast, which will shortly follow either Sunday or Monday evening. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to head to bed now and get some much needed rest, but I hope you enjoy the rest of what you're doing, and I'll see you again very, very soon. But as always, up the Arsenal.